Now we welcome our friend, Reverend Paul Hasselbeck. Thank you so much for being here. It's week 2 of 3 in a prosperity and metaphysical consciousness. For those of you who have not met Reverend Paul before, he is obviously a Unity minister and speaker, but an expert in the 12 powers. He's a metaphysician, and he's an online radio host, and he's an author, and mostly he's a friend to Unity Kitchener. So I'll turn the screen over to you, Reverend Paul, for just the fundamentals, ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, here we go. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Of course, as always, I want to remind you to sit back and relax. Maybe there's some new people here. So this is my email address, alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me. My website is paulhasselbeck.com. That's where you can find my calendar and my weekly blog, The Absolute Word, and then the podcast, metaphysicalromp2.com. Okay, so today's title is Just the Fundamentals, ma'am. So, always starting at the basics, here's little baby Jesus and Mary saying, get in, because Jesus, in his own way, is demonstrating his divinity and his humanity, because we are fully human and fully divine. Each of us is a who and a what. Our humanity is who we are. Our divinity is what we are. And so last week, we looked at supply and substance, divine ideas, principles, and laws. Wow, what a shopping list, right? But during that talk, I hope you figured out that I simplified it. Divine substance is man's supply. Supply is spiritual substance. And substance is the divine idea of the underlying reality of all things. What that means is everything that changes, whether physical or whether in your mind, are underwritten by divine ideas. So substance is the divine idea of the underlying reality of things. It's also that could be called supply. So substance or supply is the divine idea of the underlying reality of all things. And then this, whoops, I went too fast. And then this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Keep It True Lent. In every person, the Christ is enfolded. It is an idea that contains ideas. And this relates to the concept that Eric Butterworth put this way. God is spirit, present in its entirety at every point in space, all at the same time. So the entirety of the divine is present at the point of view. And in fact, present at each of the 37.2 trillion cells you have. But let's update this. In every person, the Christ is enfolded. It is the divine idea that contains all ideas and all other ideas. Now, why do I say that? Well, there's these divine ideas, which we could also call principles. 12 of them we call powers, but every other idea, every changeable idea, every human idea could not exist without an underlying divine idea, or 2 or 3 or 4. So when we say that God or Christ or the divine or spirit is the idea that contains all divine ideas, it also must contain the possibility or the potentiality of every other relative changing idea. And so ideas are central to Unity teachings. In fact, we just said that Christ is the idea that contains all ideas. So God is the idea that contains ideas. But what's the big idea about ideas? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so here we have a table, and there's all kinds of tables, aren't there? Now, in order to get that table, there must be a divine idea and the relative idea. We're going to call table a relative idea. So the creative idea and divine mind may be expressed by an individual when they have fulfilled the law of expression. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the law of expression. This is a really, really important law. It tells us one of the ways in which our mind works. Spiritual laws are laws of mind and tell us how our minds work. And so this quote will make it clearer. We must learn the law of expression from the abstract to the concrete, from the formless to the formed. This tells us that everything we create, everything we manifest begins as something more abstract, that then we move it to something more concrete. So God is mind idea or principle, which is abstract and formless, which then we move it to something more concrete and form, more specific in our mind first, and then something more concrete and formed in the outer world. Let's look at this a little differently. So everything in mind moves from the abstract to the concrete. The way that happens is through desire. You've probably heard me say this more than once, but as human beings, we move from desire to desire to desire to desire, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. In fact, we could call desire the driver. And since desire is related to the power of love, we can say love makes the world go round, or we could say love makes people go around. Desire makes people go around. Okay, let's keep drilling down. So God is mind idea, and we have this idea of table. And what must happen to get an actual table? Well, that idea of table, somehow we have to limit it or define it or focus it or refine it or specify something about that table. Because you see, another fundamental truth about the universe is the universe, including you and I, are always operating specifically. None of it operates in vague general ways. We make the generalities based on seeing how things operate specifically. And so we take this idea and we limit in our minds. Do some of you have an allergy to the word limit or limitation? You know, we have that song, I am free and unlimited. Well, in my divinity, in your divinity, that's true. In our humanity, we can't exist as a human being without limiting divine ideas. And look, there really isn't a problem with limitation, because that's how everything comes into existence. But there is a problem with over-limitation. Okay, so how do we take this idea of table and create an actual table? Well, we're going to use the power of imagination. The power of imagination is our ability to envision and dream and all of that. However, it's also our ability to shape substance. What is substance? It's supply. What is supply? The divine idea that contains all divine ideas, including the possibility and potentiality for every other changeable idea. So if we think of our thoughts and feelings as a kind of little m mind substance, we use the power of imagination to shape that substance, to move it from something vague like a table to something specific in our minds. There'll be specific thoughts, specific feelings of a specific table. Now, once we have that clearly in our mind, the next thing we have to do is take action or have some sort of activity around it. And it may be the first iteration of that physical table is maybe something you sketch on the back of a napkin, or you may even make a very professional diagram. And from that diagram, someone can build the table. As long as we're just at the point of an idea of table, it's not specific enough. We have to limit that idea of table to one specific table. You don't just generally go to church on Sunday. You go to a specific church, whether it's Unity of Kitchener or Unity Ottawa. If you stay with the desire to go to church and you don't limit it to a single church, it isn't going to happen. Okay, and so then we get this actual table. Alexa, turn off the alarm. That happened last week. All right, so an idea must be more specific for it to be useful. An idea must be limited to something more specific for it to be useful. Because if it stays general or unlimited, it's too vague. And what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. So answer these questions with me. I'm going to put the question and then we're going to pause, okay? How many tables can be manifested using the idea of table? Unlimited. How many people can use the idea of table at the same time? Unlimited. How many kinds of table can be manifested from the idea of table? Unlimited. From gorgeous tables to tiny little tables you put in a dollhouse, to ugly tables, to tables that don't function so well. What happens when the idea of table is shared? It seems to grow. Does the idea of table ever get used up? Never. Now look at that. An idea is something that can be used by any number of people all at the same time to create an unlimited number of things related to it. So that very concept of what this idea is, these characteristics, demonstrate infinite abundance. And it's the source of infinite prosperity. And this is why one of the new synonyms for God is infinite potential. As soon as we can define God as this idea that contains all ideas, we've stepped from believing God is infinite potential to knowing God is infinite potential, which is a more powerful place to go. Now, let's start looking at some of the things that we know or we talk about God. Well, actually, some of the things that Charles said that contradict some of the things we grew up with. The idea of this male deity that can give us things. So Charles said in prosperity, God does not give us material things. So we got to just let that go, okay? God will not go to the grocery and bring food to your table. We got to let that go. God does not give us material things, but mind substance, not money, but divine ideas. But God doesn't give us those. That's the old way we talked about it, that there's a separate God giving things to us. Remember, God is present in its entirety at every point in space, all at the same time. So every divine idea that God is present at the point of you and me. And these ideas that set spiritual forces in motion so that things begin to come to us by the application of the law. And you already know one of the laws, the law of expression. From the abstract to the concrete, from the unformed to the formed. You know the law of divine order, maybe. Mind idea expression in the absolute as just simply an idea in mind, but in our little m mind, we have mind, idea, expression. This is the capital M, capital I, capital E law that we use in our little m minds. So you had an idea, you needed something to place your flowers on. So you got the idea of table, and then you limited that idea of table, and that became your expression. And finally, there's a law of mind action. Many of you have heard this. This is my version of it. It's usually stated as thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Friends, that is too vague. Thoughts held in mind with feeling produce more thoughts and feelings of the same kind in mind. Now, a statement like this can be put in the first person, and it's more powerful. My thoughts held in my mind with feeling produce more thoughts and feelings of the same kind in my mind. So those are three primary laws that we use to shape substance, to bring it from something abstract to something concrete. And then Charles goes on to say, but when we continue to think about God as your real supply, everything in your mind begins to awaken and to contact the divine substance. Well, we need the Charles Fillmore translator here. This is what he really said. But when you continue to think about God as your real supply of divine ideas, everything in your mind begins to awaken and contact the divine substance, which is divine ideas. That's just a lot of words talking about the law of mind action again. When you think and feel about something, you get more thoughts and feelings about that something, and it begins to grow in your consciousness. And as you mold substance or divine ideas in your consciousness, ideas begin to come which connect you with the visible manifestation. So you had this idea of table, and you started to limit it in your consciousness. You're using that desire to drive that process. You're using your power of imagination to mold that mind substance, those thoughts and feelings. You're rejecting some of the thoughts and feelings that come up, and you're cleaving to other thoughts and feelings that begin to connect that idea of table to an actual table you're going to build or buy. That's the process of manifestation. So let's talk about this just a little bit more. So this is one of my favorite quotes, unpublished. God only does what man says he shall do. God is our servant. Did you ever think of that? That this wonderful spirit of God, out of which everything is made, is here at all times, is always present with us, and we are using that God. I've shared this quote with you before. This sounds like blasphemy, but Charles was teaching this in 1923. But again, we need the Charles Fillmore translator. Divine ideas or principles only do what we say they shall do. Divine ideas are our servant. Did you ever think of that? That these wonderful divine ideas, out of which everything is made, out of which every changing thing, whether it's a thought, feeling, or a physical thing, out of which everything is made, are here at all times. Every one of those divine ideas are present at the point of view at the same time. You must put a demand on them through your desire. I'll have more about that next week. Those divine ideas are always present with us, and we are using those divine ideas. The fact that you're here living and breathing, you are using those divine ideas unconsciously to manifest your humanity, to manifest your personality and your body. And Charles also said in an unpublished piece, there is but one power. We use it as we will. Well, that one power is a power that contains powers. the 12 powers, and all the other divine ideas. There is but one power. We use it as we will. If we send it out by our thought and word in hate, it destroys. But if we send it out in love, it builds. There are not two powers, but two ways of using power. Well, there's a multitude of ways of using powers. There's a multitude of using divine ideas. If you send out a divine idea in hate, it destroys. If you send out an idea in love, it builds. And here's one more clue. The ideas of God are potential forces waiting to be set in motion through proper formative vehicles. The thinking faculty in man is such a vehicle. Again, we have to update this. This predates 1949. Divine ideas are potential forces waiting to be set in motion through proper formative vehicles. The thinking, feeling faculty in us is such a vehicle. And we use our thinking and feeling faculty to lay hold of an idea, and then we mold it in our consciousness. And we get it to a certain point. We have thoughts and feelings about it that are very specific. Then we can go about manifesting that something beyond our minds and consciousness. So friends, those are just or simply the fundamentals. Next week, we'll be looking at Prosperity Teachings version 03.20.22, where I pull it all together somehow. Pray with me that I manage it next week. Thank you for listening. And now I invite you to take a few deep breaths and prepare for meditation. And another deep breath. And if it feels right for you, close your eyes. You can pray and meditate with your eyes open. As we center into that reminder that whatever you call God is, it's present in its entirety at every point in space, all at the same time, including at the point of view, including at the point of 37.2 trillion cells that make up your body. And actually, all of those cells have multiple points in space. So you never have literally, simply a piece of God or a drop of God or a wave of God. The entirety of the divine is present and available at the point of view. And through your desire, your power of love, and through the power of imagination, you lay hold of ideas. And you shape them in your mind from something abstract to something more specific and concrete. And then you connect all of that to an outer manifestation through your actions or activities. So let us take a few seconds, a few moments in the silence. Let us invest our time realizing these truths, realizing that you are a magnificent point of power, and you use it as you will. Friends, you are, I am fully divine and fully human. And we are the ones that put divine ideas into motion. We are the users. We are the manifestors. We are the creators from divine ideas. And let us remember to do all that creation, all that manifesting in a vast field of love. For what you and I send out in love builds. And we want to build a better world, a more peaceful world for all. So repeat after me. I am fully human and I am fully divine. And so you are, and so I am, and so it is. Amen. Thank you.